She was sold moments after giving birth, but one rancher took her home just to let her rest. Before we begin, comment your country so I know where the story is reaching. The morning sun had barely climbed over the roofs of Willow Bend when the auction yard filled with boots, dust, and low murmurs. In the center sat Mavie Hart, legs shaking, holding a newborn wrapped in a torn cloth. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Because she hadn't. Her eyes were half open, half gone, drifting in and out of awareness. The auctioneer raised his voice as if he were selling a crate of tools. "All right, folks, let's make it quick. Young woman, newborn child, both alive. Who's starting?" Mavie didn't look at him. She pressed her cheek against the baby's head and whispered, I'm here, as if the child might disappear the second she loosened her grip. Bids came from the crowd fast and without hesitation. 20, 30, 40. "Ain't worth 40, someone muttered. "She's breathing, ain't she?" another replied. Mavie flinched at every shout. Boot steps approached slowly from the far edge of the yard. Not rushed, not excited, just steady, like the man walking had already made up his mind before he arrived. Ronan Vale stepped through the crowd, a quiet rancher known mostly for keeping to himself. He didn't visit saloons. He didn't gamble. He didn't waste words. He just worked his land and avoided anything loud or cruel. But today, he walked straight toward cruelty. He stopped in front of Mavie, looked at her for a long moment, then raised his hand and said, "I'll take both." The auctioneer frowned. "Sir, the current bid is—" "I don't care what it is," Ronan said. "I'm paying it." A man in the crowd barked a laugh. "You planning to fix her up? She ain't got strength to stand." Ronan didn't look at him. "I'm planning to let her rest. That's all." The laughter died immediately. The auctioneer lifted his gavel. "Sold." Mavie's head lifted slightly, confusion mixing with fear. Her voice was barely there. Why would you do that?" Ronan stepped closer, slow and careful. "Because you need help, and no one else here is offering it." "I don't know you," Mavie said. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just come with me. You and the baby will be safe." Mavie tightened her grip. People don't help for free. Ronan removed his coat and held it out. "I'm not asking anything from you. Put this around the child. Wind's getting cold." She hesitated. Her fingers trembled, but she took the coat and wrapped it around the newborn. Ronan nodded. "Good. Take your time standing. I'm not rushing you." She tried to push herself up, failed once, then managed on the second attempt. Ronan didn't touch her, only stood close enough that she could lean if she needed. As they walked toward his wagon, Mavie whispered, "You really won't take him from me?" Ronan answered softly, "Why would I? He needs his mother." She swallowed hard. No one ever said that before. He helped her climb onto the wagon seat. Then it's about time someone did. They rode out of Willow Bend in silence. The farther they got from town, the easier Mavie's breathing became. The baby slept against her chest, wrapped in Ronan's coat. "Where are you taking us?" she asked. "To my place," he said. "It's quiet. You can rest there without looking over your shoulder." Mavie looked down at the baby. "I don't have anything to offer, not even my name." "You don't owe me a thing," Ronan answered. "Names come when you're ready." They passed open fields, broken fences, and long shadows stretching across the road. Mavie's eyes drifted shut, but each time her head dipped, she jolted awake as if remembering she wasn't allowed to relax. Ronan noticed. "You can sleep?" he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She shook her head. "If I sleep, something will happen." "Nothing's going to happen on my watch." After a long moment, she whispered, "You talk like someone who lost something before." Ronan kept his eyes on the road. "I have. Enough to know when someone needs a place to stay alive." Mavie looked at him with a mix of fear and fragile trust. "And what do you want from me in return?" "Nothing," he said firmly. "Not today. Not ever." The wagon reached his ranch, a modest place with a small cabin, a water pump, and a corral stretching into the distance. He stepped down and offered a hand for balance. Mavie didn't take it, but she let him guide her by walking beside her. He opened the cabin door. Go inside. There's a bed. A real one. Sheets are clean. There's broth on the table, if you can eat. Maeve stood in the doorway, shaking. What if I fall asleep and you take the baby? Ronan answered quietly. I'll be outside. You can lock the door if it helps. She stared at him. Her voice thinned. Why help me? Ronan met her eyes. Because you deserve a night without fear. Everyone does. Maeve stepped inside. She laid the baby on the bed gently, then touched his forehead like she couldn't believe she finally had a safe place to do it. Ronan stepped back from the door. Get some rest. I'll check in when the sun drops. She whispered, Thank you. I don't even know your name. Ronan, he said. That's all you need right now. The door closed quietly between them. For the first time in months, Maeve felt the weight in her chest loosen, not gone, but shifting. Maybe rest was possible. Maybe help didn't always come with a price. Maybe the world still had one kind man left in it. You walked away from the auction and into a wagon that smelled of saddle leather and smoke. Ronan drove slowly, the ranch house shrinking and plains opening wide. Maeve held the baby close, feeling each small breath like a fragile promise. Where are we going? She asked, voice thin. To a place with a roof that doesn't sell people, Ronan said. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. He kept his eyes on the road. His hands were steady on the reins. I don't even have a name they used, she said after a long pause. They call me things I won't repeat. Names can be simple, he replied. Maeve, that suits you. She flinched as if the sound of her own name was a new thing. You decided that? I did. If you don't want it, don't start. No, she said, a whisper. Keep it. The wagon bumped along the rutted trail. Conversation fell into silence. The baby slept, muffled under the coat. Dust settled on the edges of the world, like a forgotten curtain. When they reached the gate, Ronan stopped and looked back. This is where I live, he said. You can stay as long as you need. She watched him study the small cabin. 2 rooms, a porch with swing, a stack of wood for winter. He opened the gate, stepped down, and stood waiting as if there was nothing remarkable about offering a stranger shelter. Inside, the cabin was warm. A kettle sat on the stove. A single bed with clean sheets filled one corner. A cradle sat by the foot of the bed. He set the baby down gently and pulled the corner of the coat away so Maeve could see him breathe. How much do you want from me? She asked. What will you make me do? Nothing I wouldn't ask of any woman on this land, Ronan said. Rest. Eat. Sleep. Learn the chores if you have the strength. That's all. She studied his face as if trying to find the catch. You don't ask where I came from. I've seen where some things start, he said. I don't need to know the details to know what to do now. She laughed once, more like a small, surprised sound. You say that like you're a saint. I say that like a man, he answered. I have hands. I can fix things. I can let you be. She lay down, the baby against her chest. The weight made her dizzy with relief. When she closed her eyes, sleep came like a foreign visitor. That night, Ronan sat outside on the porch. He listened to the quiet, the distant low of cattle, the wind in the grass, the tiny breaths that marked a life. He smoked nothing. He stared at the horizon until the stars burned clean and clear. He thought of things he rarely spoke. The sister who'd vanished one winter, the bargain he'd made with himself not to let other people be taken without notice. At dawn, Maeve rose. Her movements were slow but deliberate. She fed the child from a small cup of water and mashed bread. Ronan brought fresh coffee and sat across the table. You'll need help with the chores, he said simply. I'll show you. She bit her lip. I don't know how to do anything useful. You'll learn, he said. Start with a water pump, then feed the chickens. I'll show you the fences. Work with me and you'll be tired enough to sleep well. Over the next days, she learned the rhythm of small, ordinary chores. She fetched water until her arms remembered how to move. She scrubbed the floor until the boards shone. She mended a torn blanket, and when she finished, she sat quietly and cried once, not out of misery, but because the action itself felt like proof she could keep something whole. Why do you help? She asked one afternoon while they fixed a broken post together. Sunlight slanted through the fence. making patterns on the ground. "I told you," he said, "because someone needed it." She pressed into the work, hammering nails, counting steps to make the post straight. Her hands bled a little, and she didn't complain. There was dignity in the doing. Word from town moved slowly at first, then faster until it rolled toward the supply store and the saloon. Ronan Vale had taken the girl from the auction and kept her. Some people shrugged. Others whispered. A few, the kind who profited from the market, narrowed their eyes. One afternoon, 2 men rode up, their horses snorting. Their boots hit the porch, and they walked inside without knocking. "You Vale?" the taller one asked. "Yes." Ronan set down the tool he was using and wiped his hands on his trousers. "You took that girl from the sale." "We had an interest in her," the man said, voice low. He didn't look at Mavie, who stood by the stove with the baby sleeping in the cradle. "She is not for sale," Ronan said. "We had a contract." The man replied, "You paying us the difference? We can settle." Ronan listened to the offer and then shook his head. "I don't do deals like that." The taller man's face hardened. "You ought to know the law." "The law doesn't always have a conscience," Ronan answered. "On my land, she sleeps in peace." The men left with threats thin in the air. They didn't raise a hand, but their words were a weight Mavie felt in her bones. She sat on a stool and watched Ronan watch the road where they'd gone. The silence that followed was heavy. "You could run," she said later, voice small, "and go where—" Ronan asked, "We can't hide from people who don't care if others suffer. We can only make a place they won't take from easily." She considered that. "So we make it known." "We do not advertise," he replied slowly. "But we do look after those that reach us. That will be our way." Weeks turned into months. The baby, named Jonah after Mavie found a scrap of scripture in an old Bible, grew from a fragile thing into a robust infant who laughed in his sleep. Mavie learned to soothe him with a song. She'd almost forgotten how to sing. She began to walk to town sometimes, carrying eggs and a basket of herbs. People looked twice at the woman who once stood on the auction block. Rumors softened around her like thawing frost. On an evening blurred by the slow burn of a lamp, Mavie found a scrap of paper tucked below a plate. It was a list of names and supplies. Blanket spread a note for those who need a bed. There was no signature. Mavie stared at it until the edges of the letters blurred. "Heard about that," Ronan said when she held it up. "Someone in town is watching. They don't want to be known." "Why would someone do that?" she asked. "Because some people remember what it feels like to be helped." He paused. "And some people can't sleep otherwise." The gesture, small as it was, meant more than money or words. It meant that someone else was quietly on their side. One spring morning, Mavie woke to the sound of a child calling. A small girl skidded across the yard, hair in tangles, cheeks flushed from running. She had a scrape on her knee and wore a dress patched in several places. "Are you staying?" the girl asked, bright and unafraid. Mavie opened the door and crouched down to meet her. "Are you?" she said. The girl nodded. "They said there's food and beds." Mavie smiled for the first time without a tremor. She picked up a clean cloth and knelt to wash the scrape. Ronan watched from the fence, hands folded, a ripple of something like relief passing through him. They began to keep the door open for people who needed it. Women mostly. Some with children, some alone, all with stories like Mavie's. They gave them bread and a place to sleep. They showed them how to mend a fence and a life. They didn't take payment beyond work and presence. They asked for no promises, only that everyone who left would carry their own name with them. As the small house filled with voices and the yard with laughter, Mavie realized the thing she'd feared most, being owned, had been replaced by another possibility, belonging. One evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the sky in bruised colors, Mavie sat on the porch with Jonah in her lap. She touched the faint scar around her ankle where the iron had been. The skin had healed, but the memory had not. Ronan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You named him Jonah," he said. "Why that name?" She looked at the baby, then at him. "Because he survived when I thought he wouldn't. It felt like a small miracle." He nodded. Then we keep calling him Jonah, and we remind him he was wanted. She rested her head for a moment against the wood of the porch, listening to the far-off call of a night bird. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" she asked. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Mostly I think about what is." She smiled. "That sounds like a man who knows how to stay." "Staying is a skill," he said. "One you're learning." She laughed softly. "I never thought I could belong anywhere. Now I know it's possible. A curiosity you'll want to know. Who left the supplies? Who in town watched quietly and fed the hungry without a name? You'll find that answer later. For now, the house was full, and the work of healing went on. When the first frost threatened the garden, Mavie patched the windows and packed extra blankets beside the beds. The house made space not only for bodies but for stories, slowly, painfully, lovingly rewritten. One night, after the children were asleep and the lamps burned low, Mavie placed Jonah in the cradle and sat at the small table. She dipped a pen into ink and began to write her name across a scrap of paper she planned to keep. The letters were shaky at first, then steadier. "Mavie Hart," she wrote. The name fit like something she had finally slipped into after a long day of walking. Outside, Ronan looked up at the stars. He thought of the sister who'd vanished and the bargain he'd kept with himself. Never again. He thought of Mavie, of Jonah, of the women who now slept without fear under his roof. He had not set out to be a savior. He had simply set a boundary. What belonged in his care would be kept safe. The next morning, when Mavie came out with fresh bread, Ronan had already turned the horses toward town. He stopped at the gate and called back, "I'll be back before dusk." She watched him go, the outline of his shoulders firm against the sky. She felt the small stirrings of gratitude and something else, maybe the beginnings of trust. Later, when he returned, he brought with him a quiet package, a small bundle of knitted hats, and a note, "From those who remember." Mavie opened it slowly, and for a moment, the cabin was full of the smell of warm wool and the unspoken presence of help. She closed her eyes and pressed the hats to her face. "Someone cares enough to keep watching," she whispered. "And we'll keep making them a place to watch," Ronan said. She looked up at him and met his gaze without flinching. "Then we'll keep it together." He nodded, and they both felt, for the first time in a long time, that the simple act of staying, of waking and fixing and protecting, was itself a kind of home. The first snow of the season drifted across the open fields like scattered feathers. Mavie stepped out onto the porch. Jonah balanced on her hip and watched the white dust settle on the fence posts. The ranch looked different under winter light. Still humble, still worn, but warmer somehow, as if the land itself had learned to hold its arms open. Behind her, the house was busy. The women who had come over the last months moved in quiet routines, cooking, sweeping, folding blankets. Their voices were gentle, their footsteps sure. Each one had arrived broken in different ways, and each one had found a place to breathe again. Ronan came through the gate, brushing snow off his shoulders. His horse snorted behind him. "You're up early," he said. "I didn't sleep much," Mavie replied. "Jonah's restless." Ronan stepped closer, tucking his gloves under his arm. "He's growing. That's good restlessness." She smiled a little, shifting the baby to her other hip. "I still get afraid." "Being afraid means you're awake," he said. "Doesn't mean you're in danger." They stood quietly, watching the snow thicken. Over the months, they had grown used to standing together like this, side by side, not touching, not testing boundaries, only existing in a space that felt earned and solid. "I need to tell you something," Mavie said, her voice low. Ronan nodded. "Go on." "My past isn't finished with me," she said. "Those men who came last time, they weren't the worst of it." Ronan's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Tell me what you want me to know." "I was taken from a wagon team," she said. "They kept me, sold me, moved me from one set of hands to another. I don't know how many people think they still own me." "You're not owned," he said. "They don't believe that." "Then it's time they learned." Mavie looked at him sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means we make this place louder than their threats," he said. "People listen when enough voices stand in the same doorway." Before she could reply, the distant thud of hooves carried through the cold air. The sound grew closer. Ronan's eyes narrowed, and Maeve instinctively stepped behind him, clutching Jonah tighter. A small wagon approached, pulled by a tired mule. A woman drove it, a woman older than Maeve, with stiff posture and a face lined by hard years. The wagon stopped at the gate. The woman climbed down, her boots crunching against the frost. "I'm looking for the place where women can sleep without fear," she said. Maeve exchanged a look with Ronan. That exact line was something she had once said through cracked lips and trembling hands. "You found it," Maeve said, stepping forward. The woman nodded, swallowing hard. "They took my daughter last spring. Thought maybe she'd come here." Maeve's heart clenched. "What was her name?" "Lyria," the woman whispered. One of the women inside the house rushed out. She froze at the porch steps, hand to her mouth. "Ma!" The older woman gasped. "Lyria!" They ran to each other, colliding in a trembling embrace. Others gathered at the doorway, tears slipping quietly from tired eyes. Ronan stepped back, letting them have the moment. Maeve whispered, "How did she find us?" Ronan answered, "Someone is spreading the word." Quietly, carefully. "Do you know who?" she asked. He shook his head. "Don't need to. Whoever it is, they're on our side." Maeve looked around at the small crowd now gathered. Women with scars on their wrists, bruises healing on their faces. Children whose names had never been spoken with tenderness until now. "This is bigger than us, Ronan," she said. "It always was," he replied. The day passed with new laughter echoing off the cabin walls. The older woman cooked stew on the stove, while Lyria helped patch torn coats. The place felt fuller, yet steadier, as if every new arrival strengthened something unseen. That night, Maeve rocked Jonah by the fire. Ronan sat across the room, fixing a broken chair leg. The flames crackled between them, casting gold light on everything in sight. "You're thinking hard," Ronan said. Maeve didn't look up. "I'm thinking about the future." "What part?" "The part where I stop borrowing your kindness and start adding to it." "You've already added," he said. "More than you know." She stood and walked to him, Jonah asleep against her shoulder. "There's something else," she said. "I want this place to stay long after both of us are gone." Ronan looked up slowly. "Then we build it right." Maeve hesitated. "I need to know something first." "What?" "Why did you take me from that yard?" "Truly." Ronan set the chair leg aside and met her eyes fully. "Because I saw a woman holding her child like he was the last good thing in her life, and I wanted to make sure she never had to lose him." Maeve felt her chest tighten. "People don't say things like that," she whispered. "I'm not people," he replied. She smiled, small, real, breaking through walls she thought would never fall. She reached out and touched his hand, not by accident, not out of fear, but by choice. "I want to stay," she said softly. "Not because I have nowhere else to go. Because this feels like the first place that belongs to me." He turned his hand, letting their fingers lock gently. "Then stay." Days turned into weeks. Winter thickened. The house filled with more women, more children, more small stories stitched together like patches on a quilt. Maeve grew stronger. Jonah took his first steps on the kitchen floor. Ronan repaired fences, carried water, mended roofs, and taught anyone who wished to learn. The ranch became known quietly as a place where fear ended at the gate. Word traveled far beyond Willow Bend. Travelers passed messages along trails. Mothers whispered directions by campfires, and those who had been helped left marks for others to find. One evening, Maeve stepped outside and saw firelight glowing through every cabin window. Lyria's mother laughed with a child on her lap. Two young girls practiced stitching in the lamplight. Jonah toddled between them, his tiny boots thumping softly against the boards. Ronan walked up behind her. "It's different now," he said. "It's alive," Maeve answered, "like a place born from the pieces everyone carried here." Ronan studied her face. "There's something else you want to say." She nodded. "I want to choose a life, not survive it. Choose it." "And what do you choose?" he asked. "You," she said. "This place, these people, all of it." Ronan took her hand again, but this time he didn't hide the warmth in his eyes. "Then we build a future together," he said. Maybe looked at the house glowing behind them. The world had taken everything from her once. But here, rooted in a landscape that had nearly broken her, she found something that grew stronger than fear. A home, a purpose, a family. She whispered, "We'll keep the doors open, won't we?" "As long as any soul needs rest," Ronan said. And under the quiet winter sky, with snow drifting around their boots, Maybe finally felt something she had never dared to believe she deserved. Peace.